Mom always took food along, canned goods, and at Christmas dressed poultry. One time she took a live rooster. Grandpa had a garage and no car, so the rooster lived there for some time on table scraps. I guess Grandpa made a pot of soup. Maybe he was reliving his days on the farm. My cousin's wife still lives on that farm 4 miles northwest of Palmyra, Nebraska. It has been in the Malone family for over 120 years. One note of interest here. When Grandma Nora died in 1900, my mom was 9 years old. She had older and younger siblings, 7 children in all, and Grandpa had a bad crop that year with trying to farm and raise a family alone. He had borrowed money from the bank to put the crop in, which many farmers did. In the fall, when the crop was in, he paid the bank back when he could. But since the crops were no good, he couldn't pay the loan off. The banker said, "Then bring me the deed to your farm." Grandpa said he can't do that. It's not my name. He told the banker. It seems that Grandma had the money to buy the farm, and in her will she had stated that Grandpa could farm the land and take the proceeds as long as he lived. But when he died, the farm was to be sold and the proceeds divided between her heirs only. Grandpa died in January of 1939, and so the farm was to be sold. Mom's brother Tom bought it, and a daughter-in-law of his still lives on the farm. I think Grandma was pretty sharp to have her will written that way, and by doing so kept the banker from getting the farm. He did that to several farmers in the area, became a wealthy man. He owned a bank in Nebraska City, Nebraska, and a fine big house on First Avenue. I know some of the folks he ripped off. I'm not naming names. His widow lived in the fine house for years after his death. I should also mention that Dad's mother, Grandma Smith, lived on a farm closer to Lincoln near Elmwood, Nebraska, where my dad grew up. This is about 50 miles from Omaha. I think which meant about 100 miles to her house from our farm, and then the same back. We didn't go very often as cars and roads were much different then. I don't know how often we would go for sure, but Mom would say to Dad, "You need to go see your mother." His father had died when Dad was pretty young. Grandma was 40 years old, had 11 children, the youngest of whom was 2, and stayed on that farm and raised a family. Dad didn't remember much about his dad. I remember one time when Dad went to see Grandma, I got to go along. I was small enough that I could lay my head in his lap and curl up on the seat and take a nap. I was supposed to be keeping him company. Mom sewed everything from the binder canvas to all the clothes we had from the skin out. And nobody went with big holes in their jeans. That would have meant that Mom was shiftless and lazy. Now it's the style. Every night in the fall she patched corn picking gloves. They were cotton, corn was rough and hard on the gloves. She also cut the boys' hair. We girls had long curls. The lamps that I mentioned earlier had to be filled each morning with kerosene. The chimneys shined so you were ready for night. I still have my little lamp that lit the way upstairs to bed. There. I guess I have had several lives. One very cold winter afternoon we went out to do the chores. Jack broke up the ice in the stock tank so the cows and horses could drink. You had to pitch the ice out of the tank after it was broken, so it got real icy on one side of the tank. Well, Bill threw a snowball at me and it bounced back into the tank. I leaned over to get it and throw it back at him, but my feet slipped on that ice and I went head first into the tank of ice water. I managed to get out and head to the house. It was quite a hill to go up. So when I got to the house, my clothes were frozen solid. Mom about had a stroke. I didn't even catch a cold. Another time I had a new percale dress that Mom had made. It had a full skirt which stuck out a little. That little pot-bellied stove was red hot. My skirt touched it and I was on fire. It ruined the dress and the underskirt. I hollered. Mom grabbed the wash basin full of dirty water and threw it on me and the fire was out. I wasn't hurt. We had a rule that you were supposed to empty that dirty water and not leave a mess for someone else, but that was one time that dirty water came in handy. Both of these things happened before I was 10 years old. In the 1930s, a family car was a 26 Chevy with a cloth or canvas top. As it got older, the roof sprung leaks. So when we were driving in the rain, we had to hold a pan up to catch the drips. Of course, most of the roads were mud. So you got stuck easily, and then everybody had to get out and push. That wasn't in any antifreeze then either. Something called alcohol, but if you drove very far, the radiator would get hot and boil over. And then the alcohol was no good. We didn't go in the car much in the winter, or if it rained. We drove a team and a wagon a lot. You had to feed the horses anyway, so why not use them? I never learned to harness the team. Somebody else did that. In the early 1940s, we had a 1934 Plymouth with suicide doors. What's that? Well, they opened from the front. So if you were in a wreck, they would open and you flew out. No seatbelts. Okay, Dad's health started failing in the 30s, which meant all of us kids had to help with everything. We all learned to do many things which came in handy in later life. In 1939, we moved to a farm near Persia, Iowa. We kids had to walk 1.5 miles to school each day and also back home. It was on that farm where I saw a bull snake in an outdoor hen's nest. It had swallowed several eggs. You could count them on his back. A snake swallows the eggs whole, and then when he wants to eat one, he just crushes it with his muscles and digests it shell and all. On July the 8th of 1940, there was a terrible storm. It had a lot of hail and wind. It stripped all the trees and vegetables in the garden, tore off roofs, wrecked our church in Portsmouth. The corn had been 10 feet tall the day before and was about 10 inches tall the next morning. We had a nice fruit orchard, and it was all on the ground, along with a lot of dead birds. Not a pretty sight. The crops were all gone, so Dad planted corn and cane of some kind that was supposed to take fewer days to mature, hoping to have some food for the livestock. It was a nice open fall until November the 11th, when we had a terrible blizzard. I remember Dad and Jack tied a rope from the house to the barn to hang onto so they wouldn't get lost in the storm. Again, no crop and no money. I remember what I wore to school that winter. A royal blue skirt. I had a sweater and a blouse to trade off, but the same skirt every day all winter. In March of 1941, we moved to another farm northwest of Portsmouth, Iowa. Again, we walked to school. It was about 1.5 miles. If we cut across the neighbor's field, it was closer. The farm didn't have any modern conveniences, but while we lived there, Mom got a new bottle gas stove and refrigerator. Prior to that, our refrigerator was a dumbwaiter on the back porch that you had to crank up a shaft that was down in the ground where it was cooler. The food kept better down there. We also had one of those on the farm by Persia, but it was out in the back, so you had to go outside to get it. That particular place had 2 caves, one for canned goods and the other for root crops that was stored for winter use. I don't remember which cave had the cured meats in it, but when you had one cave, everything was in it. During World War II, many things were rationed. Gasoline, leather, shoes, and sugar, just to name a few. Everyone worked and supported the war. After all, Japan had attacked us. Many folks had a victory garden, and all the sports at our school were canceled because of gas rationing. I left the farm in 1945 to go to Harlan, Iowa to work, and never regretted it. In the fall of 1945, I took a week off from work and went back to the farm to help pick corn. I had my own team of horses and a wagon and could pick 75 bushels a day, about as much as most men could pick. By the next fall, Dad had bought a corn picker to do the job. There have been many technical changes in my life. Probably the biggest for me is a computer. I can't do much on it, but enough to keep in touch with extended family and old friends. When I was small, we had a radio that ran off a car battery. If you ran the radio too long, the battery went dead, and then you had to take it into town to be recharged. Then came the wind charger on the roof, and you had a way to charge the battery yourself as the wind blew. Ray and I got our first TV on Halloween night, the year Betty started to school. Yes, a black and white portable. We had an antenna on the roof that picked up the signal from Omaha or Des Moines. Over the years, phones have changed from the box on the wall, the party line, and an office in town that employed a couple of ladies called Central. If you needed help, you rang one of them and she plugged you in on the switchboard. Phones now are small and you can do so much besides just calling someone. You all know that better than I do. Cameras went from the brown box that only worked outside to one with a flash bulb on top to a built-in flash. Next for us was the video camera, and Ray wore out several of those. Now I think everyone uses their phone. Most technology is over my head, but you all understand it. The other day, Allie was trying to teach me how to use the iPad to talk to her face-to-face in Denmark. I need more lessons. Kitchen appliances and tools have changed so much since I started keeping house. Ray had a lot of electric tools which made carpenter work so easy. You can buy anything you want or go anywhere now, but you have to work hard at your job to have the money to do it. I don't remember a family vacation when I was growing up. There was always the livestock to worry about and never money to be spent on something frivolous. I guess trains still run today. I'm sure they have changed. I know planes and cars sure have. I can't help but wonder what all will change in the next 86 years. There will probably be people living on the moon for one thing. And now it's 88 years.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take that.
Okay.
It's good. You need a drink?
Yeah. Wait. No, just shove my walker back over here and let him go.
Tell me about these pictures here. When was this one taken of?
Well, that was when he was in service.
How old were you in this one?
16. And the lower ones were in France, in Denver, and I think the date's on there. Was it? I can't read it.
How about this one?
That's also in Denver in August of '55.
Okay. Well, here's her computer.
Real dry.
All the knickknacks.
Okay, the vase is one that's from the little town in.
Wait till he comes back over.
Remember when you and Jane found that vase in Grass City? That's from when